Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine nothing, not darkness. Darkness is something, not empty space. Space is something, not silence. Silence is the absence of sound, which means sound must exist for silence to mean anything. Try to imagine absolute nothing. No space, no time, no laws, no potential, no possibility. You can't. Your mind cannot grasp true nothingness because your mind is something thinking about something inside something. And yet, here's the question that has broken every philosopher, every physicist, every theologian who dared to ask it. Why is there something rather than nothing? Why does anything exist at all? Not why do trees exist? Not why do humans exist? Not why does the universe exist? Why does existence itself exist? This is the question that has no answer, and that might be the most important thing about it. Welcome to Unfurling. Philosopher Martin Heidegger called it the fundamental question of metaphysics. Why are there beings at all instead of nothing? He believed this question should strike us with awe and terror, not as an intellectual puzzle, but as a confrontation with the sheer strangeness of existence. Think about it. There's no logical requirement for anything to exist. Nothing in mathematics demands that reality show up. Nothing in logic requires that there be something rather than nothing. Nothingness would have been simpler, cleaner, more elegant. No suffering, no confusion, no entropy, no death, just nothing. And yet, here we are, atoms that became molecules, molecules that became cells, cells that became creatures, creatures that became conscious, consciousness that looked back at the universe and asked, why? The universe created something that could question its own existence. Why would nothing do that? Why would nothing do anything? Leibniz, the 17th century philosopher, framed it as a simple logical problem. Why is there something rather than nothing? For nothing is simpler and easier than something. Nothing requires no explanation. Nothing has no contradictions. Nothing needs no cause. Something does. So why something? You might think science has answered this. The Big Bang, quantum fluctuations, multiverses. But science has a problem. Science explains how things work. It describes the rules. It maps the patterns. It does not explain why there are rules at all. Physicists can describe the first moments of the universe. They can trace cosmic expansion back to an infinitely dense point. But they cannot explain why that point existed. Stephen Hawking once proposed that the universe could create itself from nothing through quantum mechanics. But quantum mechanics is not nothing. It's a set of laws, a framework, a something. Where did quantum mechanics come from? Cosmologist Lawrence Krauss wrote a book called A Universe from Nothing. But his nothing wasn't nothing. It was a quantum vacuum, seething with virtual particles, governed by physical laws. That's not nothing. That's a very particular kind of something. Philosopher David Albert criticized this directly. Relativistic quantum field theories are not nothing. They are something. And the question is why there is something rather than nothing. Science keeps pushing the question back. Why the Big Bang? Because of quantum fluctuations. Why quantum fluctuations? Because of quantum field theory. Why quantum field theory? Because the chain never ends, or it ends in silence. Every scientific explanation assumes something to explain. But we're asking, why is there anything to explain at all? Science cannot answer this, not because science is wrong, but because the question is outside its domain. It's like asking a fish to explain water. The fish can describe currents, temperature, pressure, but it cannot step outside water to explain why water exists. We are fish asking about our ocean, and the ocean has no edges. Philosophy hasn't done much better. Some philosophers argue that something must exist, necessarily. That existence is not contingent but required. But this doesn't answer the question. It just rephrases it. Why would existence be necessary? What makes necessity necessary? Others invoke God, a necessary being, an uncaused cause, a prime mover. But this only shifts the question. Why does God exist rather than nothing? If God is something, God requires an explanation too, unless God is nothing. But that doesn't help either. Theologian Paul Tillich called God the ground of being, not a being among beings, but being itself. This sounds profound, but it's essentially saying existence exists because existence is existence, which is a tautology, not an explanation. Some philosophers embrace the absurd. Existentialists like Sartre and Camus argued that existence has no reason, no purpose, no justification. It simply is. The universe doesn't owe us an explanation. Our demand for why is a human need projected onto a cosmos that doesn't care. But even this doesn't fully satisfy. Because the question isn't about meaning or purpose. It's about ontology, about the bare fact of being. Even an absurd, meaningless universe is still a universe. Why that instead of nothing? Philosopher Derek Parfit spent decades on this question. He explored every logical possibility. Maybe existence is a brute fact with no explanation. Maybe all possible worlds exist, and nothingness is just one we're not in. Maybe the question itself is malformed, based on assumptions that don't hold. He concluded, "No question is more sublime than why there is a universe, why there is anything rather than nothing." And then, no question is harder to answer. Let's go back to nothing. What would true nothing be? Not empty space. Space has dimensions, geometry, properties. Not a vacuum. A vacuum is a state of a field. Not darkness. Darkness requires the possibility of light. Not before the Big Bang. Before requires time. True, nothing would have no space, no time, no laws, no potential, no possibility. Not even the possibility of something emerging. Because possibility is something. Here's where it gets strange. Some physicists and philosophers argue that true nothing is impossible, that nothingness is unstable, that even in the absence of everything, something must appear. But this argument assumes laws of logic or physics that govern nothing. And if nothing is governed by something, it's not really nothing. Others argue the opposite, that nothing is the default state, that existence is the anomaly, that we should be shocked every moment that we exist at all. Philosopher Roy Sorensen wrote, "The puzzle is not why there is something, but why the something is so orderly." But I think the puzzle is more basic. Not why order, not why complexity, not why consciousness. Why anything at all? Why a reality in which these questions can be asked? The more you sit with this, the stranger ordinary existence becomes. Look at your hand. That hand shouldn't be there. Not because of evolution, not because of physics. Because there's no reason why there should be a universe where hands or evolution or physics are possible. You are staring at something that has no right to exist. And yet there it is. Maybe we're asking the wrong question. Maybe why doesn't apply to existence itself. Why assumes causation. A leads to B. Something explains something else. But existence isn't a something inside existence. It's not an event. It's not an effect. It's the condition for events and effects to be possible. Asking why does existence exist might be like asking, what is north of the North Pole? The question has grammatical structure, but no meaning. Wittgenstein thought many philosophical problems were confusions of language. Maybe this is one of them. Maybe existence doesn't need a why. Not because the answer is hidden, but because the question doesn't point at anything real. But this feels like a dodge, because the strangeness remains. Even if why is the wrong word, the awe doesn't disappear. The fact that anything exists at all is still the most overwhelming fact there is. Buddhist philosophy approaches this differently. In Buddhism, the question, why does something exist rather than nothing, assumes a false dichotomy. Something and nothing are not opposites. They are interdependent concepts. Something is defined by contrast with nothing. Nothing is defined by contrast with something. Neither exists independently. Reality is shunyata, emptiness. Not empty of existence, but empty of independent, inherent, separate being. Everything arises dependently. Everything is interconnected. There is no solid something to contrast with nothing. This doesn't answer the question, but it dissolves it. If something and nothing are not real opposites, the question loses its grip. But even then, why dependent origination? Why emptiness? Why this? Maybe the point is not to answer the question. Maybe the point is to let it change you. Most of life is spent in practicality. Getting food, paying rent, checking phones, managing relationships. We forget the strangeness. We treat existence as obvious. We take the miracle for granted. But when you sit with this question, really sit with it, something shifts. The ordinary becomes extraordinary. A cup of coffee, a bird outside the window, the breath entering your lungs. These things shouldn't exist, but they do, and you're here to witness them. Physicist Sean Carroll said, "The universe exists because it's possible. That's the only answer we may ever have." But even that is astonishing. Why is it possible? Why is possibility possible? Maybe the question is its own answer. The fact that we can ask it means we exist. The fact that we exist means something rather than nothing. And the fact that we don't know why is not a failure. It's an invitation to wonder, to stop assuming the world is ordinary, to see that every moment, every atom, every thought is a mystery standing on top of a deeper mystery. The question doesn't break logic. It reveals that logic floats on something logic cannot explain. Since you've made it this far, take a few more moments to sit with what we've explored. Why is there something rather than nothing? No one knows, and perhaps no one ever will. But the question itself is a gift. It strips away the familiar. It makes the ordinary impossible. It reminds you that existence is not owed to you. You are not entitled to being. Being showed up anyway. You are the universe asking itself why it exists. And maybe that's enough. Not an answer, but a question so profound it makes everything sacred. Why this? Why anything? Why you? Sit with it. Let it unfurl. If this resonated, subscribe to Unfurling. And let me know in the comments, when you think about why anything exists at all, what do you feel? Until next time, let it unfurl.